Hello and welcome to another webinar here on how to make successful export sales by diversifying your market. It's a three-part series, okay? And it's a brand new series that we developed, so bear with us, give us some good comments or reviews so that we can understand how to best serve you. And as we go through this, if you want more of one thing or less of another, just let us know, okay? So the purpose of the presentation, as I said, is a three-part series. And the first part that we're going to go through today is really gets into the reasons for exporting, the need to plan what you're doing for exporting, how to find your market, and understanding the resources that are available, right? Part two that we're going to have, which is the same time next week, 10 o'clock on the 14th, is going to be the Maine International Trade Center. And they're going to be with us, and they're going to go over some common terms that are involved and some common costs. Part three, I'm just going to minimize this here. Part three, the financing, is where we're going to actually get a bank in on the deal. We're going to look on how to get the deal, and we're going to kind of bring it full circle and end by looking at the business plan again and how to kind of wrap that up. So this whole series, the premise of it is, hey, we want to export. What are the steps to do this? And how can I get in touch with the resources? And what do I need to know, right? And this is supposed to be a very basic level course to try to introduce you to the thought of exporting and how to get started in exporting and who the players are. Copies of the slides will be available, and this is being recorded. Okay, so for the agenda for this one today, we're gonna have an introduction on who I am, why I'm putting this on. We're gonna go through why you would wanna export, some supporting facts, and then we're gonna jump right into the need to plan your strategy and finding your markets, and then some resources that are available. As I said, this is the first of three parts. So who am I and who will I work for? My name is Peter Harriman. I am the Portland Center Director and Certified Business Advisor for the Maine SBDC. Typically, I work in the Portland office and cover Cumberland and York counties, but in this day and age, I am actually working from home, so we're doing a lot of Zoom meetings. But what does the SBDC do? Well, we provide free business advising to Maine businesses, and this is whether you are a startup business or an existing business, right? So I'm hoping that existing businesses are looking to export and they're signing on to this webinar. So with that, we basically act as an advisor, and we're paired up with an educational institution on purpose, right? So our job is to help you understand the process and understand the resources available, not to do the work for you, but we can certainly review your work, talk to you, act as a sounding board, help you with the planning, the financing, and marketing. And we try to stay as up to date as possible with anything that's happening in business, such as during COVID, we helped a lot with the economic injury disaster loans or the PPP loans or the Maine Economic Recovery Grant or the CDBG grants or the shutter venue programs or the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, or basically LMNOP, anything that has to do with business, we try to get in there and tackle it, right? Including this webinar on exporting. What we don't do is provide tax, legal, or accounting advice, right? So during our sessions or during the webinar, I might say, hey, this is where you might want to get an attorney or an accountant to talk about the specifics there, right? So we don't offer that kind of advice, but most of the advisors that we have run their own business, so we've kind of walked in your shoes, or we have a good set of education behind us. We have about 14 advisors, and they cover 21 locations throughout the state of Maine. So there's a nice little map there. More than likely, wherever you are located, there's probably going to be an office within driving distance to you. As I said, right now, we're all kind of working from our offices, so we're doing more Zoom or phone calls through the internet. But otherwise, once we are able to meet people, there's an office near you, right? Now in 2020, for instance, we saw 2,956 clients, right? So that's clients who had multiple meetings, not that's how many times we met with someone. So 3,000 businesses in Maine were advised by us, or entrepreneurs. We helped save or create 514 jobs. we had helped $38 million in capital get accessed, and we started or helped start 93 businesses. So we have a real impact on Maine, despite being such a small organization. So long story short, use us. And if you find this webinar helpful or you have other questions about business, there's our website right there. Go to our blog or go to our website, and right on the top right, there's a request advising button. So just click that, fill out the form, and you can request advising. It's free business advising with a one-on-one expert. So let's start. Okay, that's who I am. That's the introduction. So when we're looking at exporting, I like to start with a goal without a plan is just a wish, right? So the biggest part about exporting is understanding why you're doing it and then planning for it. So let's go through some facts of why you would export, right? So in trade.gov, 95% of the world's consumers live outside the US, okay? There are more than 3.4 billion e-commerce users worldwide. So what I'm getting at is there's a big wide market outside, right? In the current news, the current dollar devaluation, think inflation or stagflation, this is going to make US goods seem cheaper globally. So it's going to increase the demand overseas. It is also going to allow your business to diversify its risk. And there was a bump in 2020 because of COVID, but we're seeing the level of imports from the World Trade Organizations above pre-pandemic levels. So it has come back. So didn't COVID kill global trade? That's what I hear a lot of people say is, I don't want to get into export because of COVID, there's no global trade coming in, right? Well, when we look at the effect of COVID and where we're at now compared to before, there was a bump, it went down, but it has bumped back quite fast indeed. So we're seeing 2021 looking like a very good global trade year, and 2022 looking even better. In fact, the major drive for this is retail e-commerce sales growth. This is from 2020. So if there's one thing COVID did for the world, it really drove almost every generation online, right? And so this is just an average of the worldwide in the middle there, 27.6% increase in sales growth for retail e-commerce, right? With Latin America and North America, good news for us because they're close, right? Being the highest. So because of COVID, a lot more people are shopping online, and that means a lot more opportunities to get your product out there and to get noticed by people. So it's less of people going to the stores physically and more of people shopping online and doing the ordering there. But let's think smaller. Let's bring it back into a little bit more macro, right? Or micro. So small and medium-sized companies account for almost 97% of US exports. Now, what does that mean? Small companies that have fewer than 20 employees make up more than 2/3 of the exporters, right? So a lot of people, when I'm talking to them, they think that they're too small to export. And what I'm saying is 2/3 of exporters are fewer than 20 employees, and 91.4% are fewer than 100. But a lot of the people that are going to be looking at this webinar, they're fewer than 20. And if you think you're too small, well, guess what? 2/3 of the exporters nowadays are people just as big as you, right? Now, if we look even more micro, we can look at Maine, and I'm just doing this to highlight some of the countries, right? Canada, obviously, because it's our neighbor, but Germany, China, United Kingdom, and Malaysia, right? Malaysia's just kind of thrown out there. So these are some countries that Maine has the highest exports to, and I'm not going to rain on their parade because Mitzi is going to have a lot more cool Maine stats for you in session 2. So that's a little plug to help you watch session 2. They really kind of break down Maine because Mitzi stands for the Maine International Trade Center. Again, session 2 that goes through them as a resource and some of the cool terms that you need to know. So okay. So far, what we really heard was the who and the how much, but not really the why, right? Let's get into the why of exporting a little bit more. Why, as a business, would you choose to export? So what's the benefits? You're going to increase your product or service demand, right? And you do this basically by expanding that customer base. right? You're increasing your sales beyond your local market, and you're diversifying your client base across a larger geographic region. Now, one of the reasons to do that is you're trying to hedge against a possible downturn in your local market, right? And this local market could be Maine, it could be the US. And this downturn could be economic. It could be just an economic downturn, or it could be an environmental downturn, right? It could be some kind of environmental disaster. And if you're exporting, you can keep exporting to that other countries that aren't being affected by it, while your local market might be digging out from some kind of disaster. So you're basically hedging and diversifying your markets to make sure that sales continue. Now, you can also, when you're looking at exporting, you can saturate different markets with older products. It sounds a little weird, but basically your products now have a longer life cycle, because there might be another market that doesn't necessarily need it to be new and fancy. It's fine with something that might be a little older. So the perfect example of this is the iPhone, right? So for the American market, we're used to getting the newest and the best, right? And so the iPhone comes out, everyone wants it. Well, there are other markets that either don't have the technology to really fully utilize the newest iPhone, or they just don't want it. Maybe it's just too expensive. So the older iPhones now are going to be saturating other markets, and now it gets a longer life cycle for your products. So your products that used to have maybe a shorter life cycle in your local market, now you're possibly able to make that life cycle, the ability to sell those products, a little longer of a timeline, so you can get more sales. The other thing is there are special financing programs available from the US government for import and export markets, right? And this is a little plug for session 3 here. This will be covered in session 3 when we talk to a bank about some of the export financing that they can set up with you and how to go about doing that, right? So we kind of went through the why you would do it. And there's more reasons than that, but those are the most common reasons. And so once I get over the business saying, okay, I've made the decision, I'm going to look into exporting, great. There's 2 immediate questions that are going to hit you once you decide I'm going to export, right? One is, how do I get started? And 2 is, where do I get started, right? When we talk about how, it's usually, how do I even start? I don't know what I don't know, Pete, right? So I always say, well, let's start with that international business plan, which might get some groans because it's a business plan, but basically a business plan is going to break down all the different questions that you need to ask yourself and all the different aspects of your business. That's the whole point of a business plan. We're going to dive into that a little more in this presentation, but you have to get a plan in place to start following it, to start doing the research you need to do, right? And then the where do I find the best possible places to export, right? The world's a big, wide place. And we're going to look at some tools, 3 tools in particular, that we're going to look at live today, and it'll help you narrow down some of the possible places that you can look for to export, right? So let's tackle the international business plan first, right? And as I said, why start with the business plan? It's because it's getting us to the right questions to ask, right? That is the primary thing of a business plan. Is it is going to go through different sections, and those sections are making you focus on one particular aspect of your business. And you have to start answering the questions about that aspect so that you fully understand what it means to get into this business. And the whole point of writing it down is because if you try to keep this in your head's probably going to explode, right? Because you can't possibly remember all these facts right off the top of your head. So the good news is the International Business Plan has some of the same sections as a regular business plan, right? So you got the executive summary, description, products, management, financials. And if you need help with what the regular business plan is, we have a business plan guide that we have developed. So there's a link right there at the bottom of the slide where you can access that. So when we're talking about an international business plan, there's basically twists to the regular business plan, and then there's going to be one section in addition that is a pretty big section, right? But for twist, you're going to take those sections that we already have in a regular business plan, and we're going to insert some of those potential markets of the international details into it, like products and services. Which products will do well in a foreign market and why? Or your management, what experience do you have, you or your team, in exporting, right? Why do you think that you're going to be able to actually do this? So the additional section, and we'll get to this in a second, there's a handout that I'm going to be sending you guys. So the additional section is a market selection section, right? And this section includes factors on, when you pick a region, and we'll get to why you would pick a region, but why is it favorable? Is there a common language? Is there good infrastructure? Is there agreements between the countries? Is there good buying power? Or if we look at our product, so not even just the country, but the product, is there some reason why our product would do especially good in this particular region, right? Is there a population growth or a high literacy rate, or they're spending a lot on healthcare, right? Or there's a lot of people with internet, so they're going to be buying my product online. So there's going to be a lot of different aspects that you're going to have to research for the business plan. But don't worry, I have a lot of links for you, right? This market selection section is also broken down into its own little sections. And don't get too concerned right now. As I said, I have a handout that I'm about to show you in the next slide, right? So this market selection section breaks down, as I said, that's the whole point of a business plan. It's going to break down into different sections what you want to think about when you're thinking about exporting, right? What are the cultural assessments that I need to do to make sure that my product hits with the target market that I'm trying to do, right? We've heard all the horror stories about, I think Ford sold a car in a South American market where if you translated the name, it turned into Bean or something like that. No one wanted to buy that car. There's a whole bunch of stories about other marketing where they're culturally insensitive to the market they're going into, and the sales just flop, right? The biggest one I can think of off the top of my head is Target tried to open up in Canada, right? And they're not realizing that the Canadians already had already set their goal on what markets they're going to do and what shops to do, and Target actually pulled out of Canada because they didn't do their research. So even big companies fall prey to not doing enough research on what to do. So my biggest hint here is we're going to get a plan ready, and we're going to go through that plan. And going through that plan means answering questions. And in order to answer the questions, you're going to have to do some research. And usually logistics and pricing is also a thing that you're going to do. So this is where I'm going to try to pop open this. So everyone who is on this presentation today is going to get this. This is, I got permission from NASBite, which is a organization that trains professionals on how to teach export, or how to help businesses with exporting. And they put together the elements of an international business plan. And what I like about this, it's a little dry as far as they didn't really make it pretty, but it goes through each of the sections that we talked about. And I'm a big proponent of not recreating the wheel. That's why my slides were pretty skimpy, because this is the handout I really want you guys to be going through. Because as you go through this, it's asking you questions about each particular section, right? And if you're doing your marketing section, right, remember that market selection section? That's the new one, where if you're an international business, this is going to be the new section that you have in the business plan, starting at this, and it kind of goes through. And as I said, what I really like about what they did and what I'm going to be giving you is they broke it down into questions, right? So when you have the competitive analysis, who is your direct competition for products or services, right? And then you have to go and research that. And then it goes to the next one. What are the competitors' strengths and weaknesses? And then you go and research that. So what you're doing in a business plan really is you're asking questions, and this helps you with what questions to ask, because a lot of times you might not know the questions to ask. And then you go and research what the answer is. And that gives you some of your idea, because remember, the business plan is first and foremost to convince you that this is a good idea. And then second is going to be used to convince the bank or whoever you're getting financing from that this is a good idea. So as I said, this goes through, and everyone's going to get a copy of this. This goes through the different questions that you're going to want to ask and the different sections that you're going to want to go through. It even has towards the bottom, and I'm going to show you the bottom 2 pages here. If I go down real quick, pricing considerations, they have a whole list of resources, right, with links that you can go through. That's why I like this so much. And these are the 2 people that from NASBite that put this together. So I don't like recreating the wheel, but I certainly like it when someone has created something that we can use. So I'm going to send that out to everyone, and it's going to be your detailed guide on the questions that you need to be asking yourself when you're getting into import-export. And we're going to, with these questions, start researching with some of the resources available on that guide and some of the resources that we're going to show you right now. We're going to start researching on what does it mean for exporting, right? Because one of the biggest questions that you will need to answer, and it's not very evident, it's a big wide world out there. Where are we going to export to, right? Because if literally the world is your oyster, where is it that I'm going to send my product to get sold? So I'm hoping I'm timing this right. So a majority of this, I'm going to go through 3 different tools that are going to help you find some markets, okay? Now, remember how we said that global internet traffic was up because of COVID, right? We saw that huge increase in retail sales. So one of the newer tools that it's pretty flashy is the power of Google, right? Google created something called a Google Market Finder. You do need a website address to use this, and I'm going to click on it, and we're going to open it up, and I'm going to show you. Right? So when you click on it, you have a get started, and we have dive into new markets, right? This is something a lot of people say, well, I know there's a resource, but I don't know how to navigate that resource. So that's why we're going through this. So I picked a random company in Otisfield, Maine Modern Tile, and I'm going to put their website in here. If you don't have a website, or if you have a Facebook site, because I tried Facebook a few times and I realized that Facebook did not necessarily translate, because what's going to happen once you agree to the terms is Google is going to look at that website, and it is going to come up with the categories that you might be using to export, right? So in this case, Maine Modern Tile has laminate flooring, tiles, wood flooring, home improvement and maintenance, right? And let's say I think home improvement and maintenance is just a little too broad. I can X it out. Or let's say my website doesn't quite get to the categories I want. Well, I can add a category if I want, right? So if you don't have a website, is what I was saying, you can go to your competitor's website and enter that one in. And then you can, as I said, filter out the categories, either take them out or add them in. And once you hit confirm categories, it's going to come up with this little heat map of the world. And up top, it's going to have, it says 2, 3, 4, because I think number 1 is the US, so it doesn't count number 1. So it says, hey, United Kingdom, Germany, and France might be areas that you want to look at. Okay, so now we have a nice little map of the world, and we have even suggestions from Google. And why is Google suggesting it? Well, let's go down and let's complete the profile. I don't want updates. So at this point, it's free. Now you have to sign into Google. So if you're someone who doesn't like logging in, it's still free, but it's going to want you to sign in with an account, free account. Of course, the internet's not working, but this is where Google is going to come up with a whole list of the different countries that you can do. And this was, I promise you, working just fine before this presentation. Let's see if we can do it again. Paste it. Doesn't it always happen? Comes up. going to sign in. Of course, it's not going to work now. I apologize, folks. Of course, you have to plan on this. But the Google Market Finder, which usually works very, very well and is not working at this particular moment. I knew I ran this risk when I did it. Well, this is not a very good sign for Google. I apologize. In any case, oh, there we go. There's a short list. Here we go. This is what I was trying to get to. So if we chose the top three, United Kingdom, Germany, and France, right? Typically there's that snafu doesn't happen. It goes pretty slick. I did it 20 minutes before and it went through fine. But typically when you're going through, if you selected United States as your market, because we're in the United States, it's going to give you compared to the other different markets. So you can kind of go through and say, okay, one of the ranks that I like is this ease of doing business, right? So you can say, okay, France is not as easy as doing business with the United Kingdom. When I look at household income, well, Germany's got a nice household income compared to United Kingdom or France. So now I go back, okay, and you can look at the different things, including logistics. Logistics is, okay, how hard is it to get products into the country, right? And the countries we chose were first world countries. So when you look at the time to export, they're in hours, just a little over a day for Germany. But when you're looking at other countries that are maybe not in first world nations, that time frame might be longer, and you might want to look at that, right? And then there's cost to import. There's a lot of good data that you can get on this with this Google Market. And as I said, it's going to give you all this information on the top ones that you picked. And what we didn't see, and maybe we can get back to it, hopefully, this is where it crashed. Here we go. What you didn't see is you could choose other markets. Google is going to show you a whole bunch of other markets, and you can even show more, and it loads more up, right? So these are all the different markets ranked usually through Google. So take it with a grain of salt, right? So you can certainly use Google to try to figure that out. And that's going to give you kind of your first set of countries that you can look at. So use the power of Google to your advantage. The other thing you can do is you can go to the census. And again, you're going to get the slides. You're going to have all these different links available to you. And if you hit the search button, right, and let's say we want to look up linoleum, right? And again, so what happens is Schedule B search engine, what we're trying to do, right? Schedule B is a classification system, and there's something called the Harmony system, and Mitzi in section 2 is going to get into that when they go through terms. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to find our product. We're trying to find a code for our product, because some of the other search engines, not the Google engine we just did, because we didn't need it. Google was able to pick it up through the different categories. But a lot of different countries are going to base their searches on a Schedule B harmonized system number. So what you do is you can put your product into this website, and your product is going to come down with a number once it fetches it for us. And that number is then going to be put into a search engine. And of course, the internet is not working at all. So once we get that product number, if we go to this next site, this is the import-export site. So we're looking for countries that import, right? Let's see if I remember the linoleum number, because I don't think the Census Bureau is going to do it for me. So mental note, I'm going to have to take screenshots of each of these. I want to actually show you guys how to do it, because I find sometimes the screenshots are misleading. But evidently, I'm going to have to actually take screenshots next time because the internet does not work when I'm doing a presentation, which is horrible. This usually does not work. But with this one, with this site, you would find your number on that Census Bureau site, which does not want to work, just like the Google site didn't. And you can actually, let's say we wanted to do, please refine your query. So let's say we want to do live sheep and goats, just because it's one of the options available, right? So you would find your number on that Census Bureau site. Once you find your number, you can enter your number here, and it's going to give you kind of the same thing as Google. It's trying to go out and find the information and bring it back. And usually I like to see it in a list. This is a list that you can get. And it's going to say, okay, when we're looking at live sheep and goats, as far as people importing them, Saudi Arabia imports the most, right? It's imported 3,345 tons, it looks like, of goats. So, and then you have all the different countries here. So if I were doing this, I would take my data that I just got on Google of the top sites, and then I would come back here onto this graph. I say, okay, what are the different markets that Google identified, and can I line them up here, right? Because this is going to be a little more data than Google, including this annual growth, right? So if I was looking at sheep, I look at Jordan versus Saudi Arabia, because if I look at Saudi Arabia and I look at the annual growth down here, 2019 to 2020, Saudi Arabia has actually been decreasing over time, whereas Jordan, which we only have the one year here, Jordan's increased by 125% over this last year. So out of all these, besides maybe Ireland, for some, was it Ireland? Yep. Ireland's increased 2,000%. But here I'm going to say, okay, Jordan might be a good option to look at as well, right? So that's another tool that we can use, is getting that schedule number, then go into the trade map, and that's going to give us our actual data. So Google is kind of a good first step because it's nice and slick, and it's going to get us kind of a heat map of the world, and it's going to get us our top 3, and we can look at our top 5 if we need to. Then we're going to go into these more traditional programs that aren't as new, like the trade map that we just went into, or the next one, which I'm a little hesitant to go into because this one always has given me trouble as far as loading up, right? So the census itself, the one that we could not get the number for linoleum to work, this one also has kind of a heat map on US exports, right? And the same thing, we're going to have to know the number. That's why I had that number on the Schedule B. Once you know the number, you can then choose that number. And I'm trying to remember, so 10104 is the number that begins for live sheep. So we're going to just do 0104. If we do this, export of live sheep, and it gives me, as it says, the top 5 countries by value. So this is countries that we're exporting to. And so we're going to compare all 3 of these databases to try to come up with kind of like the top 5 list of countries that we're going to want to do. Now, why I'm showing you this site, even though I was hesitant about it, is because it has a unit price, right? And unfortunately, it's kind of like way over here. So usually this is a little bigger. I just chose sheep because it came up quick. But this is going to give you, for most of the products, it gives you the average price per unit that is being exported. It collects that data. So what this does is it allows you to know, hey, you know, this market might be good down here. So exporting sheep to Thailand might be good, but I'm going to get a whole bunch more money if I export to Canada, which is a lot closer anyway. So Thailand price per unit versus Canada is a lot different. So that's going to kind of show me where some of my pricing is. And there's a lot more data than just that, so I encourage you to play around with it. But what we're doing is we're going through the 3 different resources that are available right there, because we're trying to figure out where are our markets. And what we did is we started with that Google, which kind of gave us the overall internet searches and just general trends in a country. And again, I wish the Google site was working better, but it has a lot of information that really drills down into each specific country. And next time I do this presentation, I will take screenshots versus trying to get on it live. And then we went on to the trade map. The trade map after we figured out the number, because Google doesn't care about the number. They were kind of smart. They said, no one really cares about the number unless you're actually exporting. So if we're trying to get into it, let's just get all the categories. With the other two data sources that I have, you do need to know what the number is, what your Schedule B product number is. So you're going to put in that product on the census site, and it's going to give you your number. And once you enter it into the trade map and or you enter it into the census site, those two different sites are going to give you much more drill down information as far as historic exports. Are they growing? Are they shrinking? As well as some of the price points and other countries that you might not have thought of. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to not just limit it to one database. We want to look at all three of these databases to help us really narrow down what countries should we be looking at as far as, are they high in exports? Now, the one red flag that I do want to raise is, just because a country has a high amount of exports, the downfall to that, is that it might be a very competitive. So you don't necessarily want to do the top of the list, right? So I know Germany came up on the top of many of those lists. Well, just because it's the top doesn't mean it's the best, right? You still have to do the research as far as, hey, okay, there's a lot of people exporting linoleum to Germany. Is the market too saturated? Is there enough room for me? Is the market growing? And that's why that second database that I showed you, the trade map, which shows you the different categories there. Let's see right here. Whoop. That shows you the different growth percentages. That's really useful, because then you can look at the different country, and the top country isn't necessarily the best. It might be shrinking. Whereas if you go a little down, that's why I have this whole sheet. And again, it has a whole bunch of different data that you can use. And then finally, you have the third data set that I told you, the census. So when you look at these three and you compare them, it's going to get you a pretty good idea of where you can go, right? So once you get these countries, right, and you're like, okay, I know which countries or which 5 countries I am thinking about. How do I kind of then compare or contrast or dive into more information about those countries? Well, the good news is that these resources right here get right into it. Like the World Bank has a lot of information about each country, their population, how their financial systems are going, which is going to be very important to you. You also have the CIA World Fact Book, which really drills down into different countries and might get you into more of the government and what risks there might be there. There's also Global Edge MSU. Has a few of these different things, and if we just click on one, for instance, this is a country comparative tool. So if we click on that, we can say, okay, I want to see the population total for, let me pick some countries. Let's say Canada. And where's Germany here? We're going to pick on Germany again. Oop. Germany, where are you? Germany. We're going to compare. And so it kind of comes up and it's going to look at the different countries and compare them based on what you said. And you saw all those different categories, right? So you can, once you get narrow down which countries they are, there's a whole bunch of tools that are going to show you what that means for that country. So this one, the market potential index, right? This isn't so much going to categorize it based on your search, but this is going to look at different countries and it's going to give them different scores on how well they're going to do in different categories of either market size, their growth rate, consumption capacity, right? And so you can find, okay, where is again, we're picking on Germany, where is Germany this whole deal. So you can look at the different countries that you've just selected, so you can do a little more research into what that means to select that country. As I said, the biggest question after deciding to export, after looking at that business plan, the international business plan, and what different aspects to look at, the number one question that comes up when people ask me is, where should I export to? Because there's a whole big world, and if I don't have personal connections to a particular country that I can manipulate or use, then where else am I going to look, right? And so there's those 3 databases to find a list of countries that might fit, and then these databases to help you really drill into those countries and understand what those countries can do. Now, there's also resources in Maine, right, for every business, though the ones on the left have people that can help with an international business plan versus the ones on the right. So there's a Maine International Trade Center, which will be in session 2. There's a Small Business Development Center, which is myself, my organization. There's SCORE. There's a Women's Business Center as well. So there is resources in Maine. And of course, there's a lot of online resources for export businesses, right? Trade.gov, the very first one that's listed there, has a ton of information to help you, right? So if you're one of those people that, you only have time at night to kind of research this, here's a lot of different web links that you're going to have that really help you. There's an SBA has an export business planner with the link right there. There's the trade map that we went through, has a lot of information. There's an International Chambers of Commerce and NASBITE, the organization that gave you that international business plan layout, that's there as well. So there's a lot of different online resources, but certainly don't forget the resources that are right here in Maine that you're going to be able to tap into, right? So to kind of summarize what this is up, because then we'll have a nice 10 minutes of questions. So exporting has a lot of advantages, right? Yes, it is work just like anything else, but it does have the advantage that we went through as far as diversifying your market, longer product life cycle, or increasing your market exposure as far as increasing your customer base, increasing your market. But you need to start with a plan. And starting with a plan means you need to understand the different questions that you need to ask and the different aspects of what it means to get into international business and export. So as I said, everyone's going to get that email of that guide that I had, that NASBITE wrote up for us, that really gets into different sections, because the whole point of the plan is to tackle it from different angles. And you have to start with the plan. That's really where you want to start, because that's going to lead you down questions, which is going to lead you down to research, which is going to help you understand your market, right? And then that's the next thing, is identify where is your market? Where is the best place to export? And as I said, I wish they worked a little better. Next time I know I'll just have to take screenshots rather than doing a live demo. But there is a Google Finder, there is a trade map, and there is a census. All 3 of those resources are going to get you a nice list of countries with either, and again, you set the criteria, either are high on demand of doing searches, or high in exports, or whatnot. And all that data is collected by the government and free to you to use, right? And lastly, reach out to resources that are available to you. You don't have to do it alone. Yes, there's a lot of resources that I showed you, so you can do it in your own time, at your own leisure, but there are also resources that you can actually talk to and ask questions of. With that being said, session 2, which is October 14th at 10 a.m., will also be recorded, and that is going to be the Maine International Trade Center coming in with just who they are and how they can help. They're also going to kind of go through some common questions. And if I understood it correctly, their presentation is going to start with, okay, we got an order. So my presentation was, how do we find places to put orders? And the next thing is going to be, okay, we got an order, so let's go through some common terms. It's going to go through some common costs and some common denominators as far as what do we need to think about. In session 3 on the 21st at 10 a.m. is going to really go into financing your export business. And then again, follow up with, okay, how do we go back to that business plan and kind of wrap it up so we can we can finalize this whole thing and get started. So thank you for coming today to the first of the three-part series. I do encourage you to go through all three parts to really understand. But this first part was your launching point, so that you got all the information from this first part to start the planning process, to get resources, to understand where you can go to look further, either at your particular market and your particular product, find some countries that might be interesting to you to research further, and then also the links to do that research. And then, of course, there's the resources in Maine that you can look at, or the resources online. So the second part is going to be talking to one of those resources, one of the best resources in Maine, the Maine International Trade Center. And again, we're going to wrap up with the banks. We're going to talk to a bank who does some import-export business. They're going to talk about some of the things you want to be aware of. And then we'll wrap up just very briefly. We'll touch back upon that business plan and just go through some of those different categories that we're going to need to really highlight. So thank you again.